Alright, this video is going to explain 6.5b, which is percent proportions. So the first thing that I would do is I would read to my class the SE. So to solve real-world problems, to find the whole given a part and the percent, to find the part given the whole and a percent, and to find the percent given the part and the whole, including the use of concrete and pictorial models. Now, normally I go through and I break down the SE with my class just to help them realize what exactly is going to be tested and what they're responsible for. This one's a little bit difficult because they kind of don't have an idea of what we're doing. So all I would do is give them the SE and we would go through and underline the important parts. So to find the whole given a part and the percent, that's going to be important. And then to find a part given the whole and a percent. And then the third part of that, to find the percent given the part and the whole. Now, the use of concrete and pictorial models, that's important too, but I would just have them underline those three major parts because we're going to come back to that in a little bit, okay? All right, so now I would have them, usually I give them a little sheet of paper to put into their notebook that already has maybe just the words written down and they have to write the definition, or it has the definitions and they have to match the words. That way it makes it just a little bit more difficult for them trying to match what they need to know. So they need to know percent, parts per 100. They need to know what a whole is, and they need to know what a part is. And they're going to have to understand those words when they're reading the actual word problems. So here is one setup. So you're at a restaurant where you serve your waiter a 15% tip on a bill that totals $30. How much was the tip? This flip chart here has you setting up the percent, the total, and the part and the whole. Before I even get to this part, I'm going to jump over to another flip chart and we would talk about this. So there's many kinds of percent problems besides just finding the percent of a certain number. If you solve them using the proportion strategy, you should have no difficulty. So the whole key here is relating this back to a proportion. And that's what we really want to draw their attention to. So it's already something that they're comfortable with and that they should be able to do. So then we ask them to consider the statement, percent of the whole is the part. And then I introduce our little road map down here. So we're always going to have percent over 100 and part over whole. And at this point, I would ask my class, what is the one number in this diagram that will never change? And normally I would give them, 30 seconds to a minute to kind of think about it because some of them are kind of slower coming to the conclusion that there's one number on there that is never, ever, ever going to change. After they've had that think time, I would probably call on someone randomly and, get their answer. Hopefully, they tell you that this 100 right here is going to be the number that never changes. That 100 is always going to be in that bottom left corner. From here, we're going to go to the next page. Okay, so these are just kind of little short snippet of examples rather than jumping right into word problems. So here they can really get the wording down. So the first one, 8 is what percent of 16? So right off the bat, they have to figure out, is the is attached to the 8? 8 is. Yes, it is. Okay, so I can circle those two. What percent and of is attached to the 16? That means I'm looking for percent. So my variable is going to be the percent. And here's our variable down here. And it looks like our lines were left off. I normally just have my students make a big plus sign and then they fill in their answers from there. All right, so now we have this one set up. Let's go to an actual problem. All right, so remember the phrase, percent of whole is part. That just helps them remember that the of goes with the whole and the is goes with the part. All right, so we have 20% of what number is 18. And here we have it set up where our variable belongs to the whole because that's what is missing. So now this is very familiar to them. This is a straight proportion. All they have to do is use their cross multiplication. So they can cross multiply 20 and x and get 20x. And they can cross multiply 118. So they get 20x equals 1,800. And then they're going to divide both sides by 20. And usually by now, I've taught my kids that if you have a fraction, these 20s are going to cancel out. If you have a fraction, the zeros on the end cancel each other out. And now I have a fact that I know. I know that 2 goes into 18 9 times, and there's 1 0 that's left over. So that way I get x equals 90. Now, let's talk about a percent proportion when decimals are involved. A lot of our students seem to get discouraged when they start seeing fractions and decimals mixed in. I always tell my students to just treat it as a normal number. Just ignore it until you have to use it. So first we read this. Find 42.5% of 48. Now, usually my students would have whiteboards, or I would allow them to write on their desk with Expo markers. That way I can go around and I can make sure that everyone is doing the problem correctly and that everyone is getting the same answer. All right, so I would have them set this up, and my first question to them would be, does the of belong to the 48, or is the of the question? And again, I would give them that think time and maybe even have them discuss it with a partner before I even call on anyone, because I really want to drive home the fact that they have to know which words belong to what numbers. Okay? All right, so we have 42.5%. And then we have of 48, and our 100 is going to go down here. And here's our x. So if we do our cross multiplying, we get 100x is equal to 42.5 times 48. Now, this one just so happens that they cannot do this one in their head. So they're going to have to show their work on this one and figure out what 42.5 times 48 would be. And that is 2,040. And that's still equal to 100x. If I divide both sides by 100, and again, I've also explained to my students that multiplying and dividing by 100 simply moves a decimal. So now my kids know that zeros on the end cancel each other out, and 1 0 right here simply means that that decimal moves. So I get that x equals 20.4. All right, we're going to jump back to the other flip chart. And at this point, this is where I would have them work with a partner. So these word problems are here. They're set up for them. All they have to do is practice their proportion skills and cross multiply and divide. Now, the tricky part about some of these is that there are decimals mixed in. So they're going to have to be very, very careful, and they're going to have to double check each other. A lot of times as well, I would have the students, when they're working in partners, check with the partners across the way to make sure that everybody is on the same page and that everybody is getting the same answers. Finally, to conclude, they would have a quick write at the end of class. So this one gives them a Toys R Us coupon that is 30% off all regular priced video game accessories. So any video game accessory that's bought, they get 30% off. And their mission is to write a percent proportion problem to go with the coupon. They have to solve it on the back of their page. And then tomorrow morning, we trade problems and solve them for our warm-up. That way, everyone's using the same percent. They're all going to get different answers, but at least we can keep the percent common and go around and check and make sure that everyone is getting the correct answer and everyone is doing the process right and everyone is setting up the problem correctly. This quick write would end class, and then like I said, the next morning we would exchange these and go over them again just to make sure that it's fresh in their brains.